So that is what we see. Now, moving in really quickly through technological advancements that happened during this time that really spurred the creation of the development of the Industrial Revolution. So first, the spinning jenny is invented in 1764 by James Hargreaves. This really spurs the Industrial Revolution. So James Hargreaves, well, let's back up just a little bit. So sorry, I want to find the name of this other invention for you all. The flying shuttle. So in the early 1700s, there's this invention called the flying shuttle, which allows cloth to be made a lot quicker. So people could make cloth quicker, but that thread that they needed to make cloth was still kind of being held back by being made by hand, slowly by hand, one strand at a time. Well, James Hargreaves sees the need for thread to be made quicker so that the people who could make cloth really quickly could have access to more thread, and everything could move quicker down the line. So he sees the need for this, and he makes this invention called the spinning jenny. He names it after his daughter, which allows for 8 threads to be worked at one time. So you can make 8 threads of like yarn or whatever of the material that you needed at one time instead of just one. So they could spin the cotton threads into cotton into threads at the rate of 8 versus 1. So this really increases the amount of thread that's being made, which makes cloth being produced more easily, and then clothing can be made more easily and more efficient. So the spinning jenny is the first invention. Oh, sorry. Next, the steam engine is made by James Watt, or he didn't necessarily make the engine, but he made a more efficient steam engine. So he makes the steam engine in 1765. That steam engine provides easily accessible and cheap power. So the steam engine can be used to power machines quickly and cheap. Before this, there were steam engines, but they used a lot of fuel of coal and a lot of heat, so wood they didn't use coal, they used wood to heat it, so they're constantly chopping down trees to create steam to power these engines. They weren't efficient, they didn't work very well. You see this specifically in trying to mine coal. So when they were mining coal and they needed to drill down, they were using steam engines to power those drills, but they weren't very good, they weren't very efficient. Well, James Watt creates this new steam engine that's a lot more efficient, and so mining coal, running machines, all of that is more easily done, and it's done cheaper too. From James Watt invention of the new steam engine, you have steam-powered transportation, so trains and steam-powered boats, things like that. So he makes not only running machines easier, but also transportation easier. Next is Eli Whitney and his cotton gin in 1793. So when you pick cotton, when it's raw, there are all these little seeds in the cotton. And prior to Eli Whitney's cotton gin, you had to pick those seeds out by hand before you could turn the cotton into thread. It was really time-consuming and a very labor-intensive job. Eli Whitney creates this cotton gin, which I should have told you, the spinning jenny is the bottom one, the big loom with the big wheel on it. The top little wooden box is Eli Whitney's cotton gin. And you would put raw cotton into it and spin that knob, and it would run the cotton through this series of almost like brushes, wire brushes, and it would pick out the seeds for you, and they would drop to the bottom of the box, and the clean cotton would pass over. So this made cleaning cotton just unimaginably quick and fast. It was so effective that in 1790, the United States, the South in the United States, exported 1.5 million pounds of cotton. So just keep these numbers in your head. 1790, 1.5 million pounds of cotton. 20 years later, in 1810, the South in the United States exported 85 million pounds of cotton. So in just 20 years, because of the invention of Eli Whitney's cotton gin, the South increases its production of exported cotton by 83.5 million pounds. That's unimaginable. So next, process for making steel. In 1856, Henry Bessemer creates a process for making steel. So prior to this, all of the tools and machines and things like that were made out of iron. And iron is a pretty good metal, but it is relatively hard to it's hard to work with. It's not malleable. It's not easy to bend or work with, and it's not the strongest metal. Bessemer realized that if you blow pressurized air over iron, it creates steel, which is a much stronger and purer metal. It's easy to work with, and so now machines and tools and different goods can be made out of steel, and they're going to be more durable, they're easier to make, they're going to last longer, they're going to be higher quality. So that really is a huge advancement when you're working with machines and tools to create things. Next, some advancements in not in technology, sorry, in medicine and science. Edward Jenner in the late 1700s creates a smallpox vaccination. He finds out that there's a strain of cowpox, which is not as deadly or infectious. I shouldn't say infectious. It's not as intense as smallpox, so it doesn't affect humans as badly as smallpox does. And if he inoculates, which just means to inject people with the bacteria from cowpox, they will be immune from smallpox for the rest of their life. This is huge. Smallpox killed a lot of people during this time period, and so now people can be vaccinated for smallpox. Next, Louis Pasteur discovers bacteria. This happens in the mid-1800s. He's watching the fermentation of alcohol happen, and he realizes there are these teeny tiny organisms. He calls them bacteria, and he realizes that bacteria can be killed by heating it. This is super important. You all probably buy pasteurized milk in the grocery store. That comes from Louis Pasteur, who realized that if he heated up liquids like milk, it killed bacteria, and those liquids would stay good for longer. You could drink them safely for longer periods of time. Pasteur also realized that bacteria caused other diseases as well, so it's a huge advancement. All right, so those are some of the advancements. Really quickly, last thing for tonight's video is the impacts on slavery. I wanted to talk about this because it goes along with all these inventions and the advancements in specifically the textile industry. So because of the increased demand for cotton to create thread, to create clothes within these factories, there was an increased demand on slavery, specifically from the Cotton South. So increased demand for slavery in the south of the United States. So the United States is importing more and more slaves to work on these cotton plantations, even though the cotton gin made processing cotton, taking it from raw to a finished product, made that a lot quicker and easier. The Cotton South was growing a ton more cotton. They were growing tons and tons and tons more cotton, and they needed people to pick it. That's very labor intensive, and so they were importing more slaves. So it increased slavery. However, it eventually leads to the abolishment or prohibition of the slave trade and slavery altogether. So eventually England realizes that they can import raw cotton from the East Indies a lot cheaper than from the United States, and so slavery is abolished. So in the United States, they end the slave trade in 1807, and they ended in 1807 in Great Britain, or the acts are passed in 1807. In the United States, it's not officially ended until 1808, but they passed this legislation in 1807. So the act prohibiting the importation of slaves is the United States Act, and the abolition of the Slave Trade Act of 1807 is the one from Great Britain. Then slavery itself is outlawed, so the actual act of owning another person is outlawed in the United States in 1865, obviously after the end of the United States Civil War, and in 1833 in Great Britain. So that is the impact on slavery of the Industrial Revolution. So thanks for watching our video tonight. Tomorrow we'll have another video on the Industrial Revolution and its effects. All right.